welcome to another edition of the Major Music Lounge podcast. It's your host, D Dot, coming at y'all. And today we're actually going to be talking to The Sizzos, who is a songwriter and musician from Eugene, Oregon. Genre is like alternative and new wave. I got a chance to listen to some of his music. We're going to talk about that and more. He recently released a single called Lizard Skin, and I kind of like the vibe to that. Kind of has that 80s synth vibe mixed in with some guitar. We're going to talk about that and his journey creating music. If this is your first time tuning into the Major Music Lounge podcast, we like to talk to other creators about their creative process, their journey creating music. Maybe they also had a recent project that was released, and they're here to talk about that as well. So you could follow me on Instagram at d._majormusic. Same thing on TikTok, and if you use Threads, I'm also on there. Same thing. And you can follow me also on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at d.mme. And if you like this episode and hang around to the end, go ahead, hit the subscribe button and the like button as well. I really appreciate it. Now let's go ahead and get into the interview. We're back with the Major Music Lounge podcast, joined by the Sizzos. What's good? How are you today?
Oh, I'm really good. I'm really good. I'm here in Oregon and I get to go to San Diego today, so things are great.
How far is that? You're flying or you driving
Oh, I'm
down there?
flying. I'm
Okay, all
flying.
right.
I don't have the patience to drive. Yeah, it's a 2-hour flight, so not too bad.
Okay. All right, yeah, because I know that's probably a long distance. How's the weather over in Oregon?
Yeah, well, actually, it's been hot, so it's gonna be cooler in San Diego. I'm gonna get that beach breeze, which will be nice.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of cool. I'm actually out here in Dallas, so we've been having a lot of rain lately, which it's kind of made it cool down. I don't mind that because the summers are brutal over here.
Yeah, yeah. I have a brother that lived in Fort Worth for a bit. Rough.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you get started creating music?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was thinking about that for something else, and I started making music when I was real little. Like I remember taking the trash cans, turn them upside down, banging drums, making up songs back in the day. And then when I was in high school, kind of had this like joke band, like super stupid, like typical high school, like kind of dorky thing. But I didn't really play an instrument. And then I decided to learn guitar right after college. So like 22 is when I first started strumming a guitar. And within, I don't know, 6 months, I was starting writing songs. And the band that I was in then, or it became, was a kind of like a hippie funk, you know, jam band. And so we played around San Francisco and it was cool. We had, 40 or 50 people who come to each show and dance. But what I realized now is that I was writing songs back then, not with like my heart and soul, but more with like my butt and feet, what's gonna get people shaking and moving. And so just recently, I would say like just before the pandemic and into the pandemic, I started saying to myself, like, you know what, I want to try this songwriter thing for real, real. And so that's when I put my heart and soul into it.
Wow, well, yeah. I mean, just like we were kind of talking in well, prior to the show, same thing. Music started at a young age for me. It was actually like my brother was the first musician of the family. He was in band, and I kind of saw what he was doing. Then I kind of followed down the same path, and I just kept it going. Once I got through it, like learning the trumpet, I wanted to start learning how to produce entire tracks because around that time it was like the mid to late 90s, and he had a lot of like West Coast hip hop that was kind of
Mhm.
at its peak. And I was inspired by a lot of that, so that was kind of like, I guess, the path that got me to being into music production and being an artist. So I can totally relate to that.
What was your jam back then? Like, what would in the 90s, what was your out like? I remember the Chronic. I listened to it every day going to school in my friend's car every day.
Yeah, yeah, that was one of them. I would say like All Eyes on Me, Tupac, and then
Mhm.
Me Against the World as well. That came out before then. I was a big Pac fan. I was a big Bone Thugs and Harmony fan too around that time.
Yeah.
First of the Month, Eternal 99. So that was some
Love it.
really good times for hip hop music in the
Yeah,
90s.
yeah, love it.
So got a chance to listen to your new single Lizard Skin. Now when I listen to it, I get this kind of like 80s synth type of vibe from it, but mixed with a little bit of guitar. Now, what was the inspiration behind creating that track?
That's a great question. And that track was sort of a happy accident. You know how that happens sometimes? Like there's
Yeah,
just something
yeah,
floating in the ether and it lands in your lap. You're like, all right, I got to do something with this. I don't have a choice. It just the song kind of takes you as opposed to you taking the song. That's kind of what happened with this one. And I think since I started writing songs for Real Real, I've really been there's a lot of nostalgia in my music, whether it's like lyrically or sonically. I try to make a mix of what felt like, the age where I was learning and I was coming into myself with a little bit of modern twist, what I'm learning, what I'm dealing with now. And so, like sonically, I do try. I like that you picked up on that. That there's this '80s retro vibe, but then there's a little bit of modernity to it. Um, yeah, I was just messing around one day, and it was one of those times where I came up with this one part. I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And I came up with another part. I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then Lizard Skin has like six parts that repeats. It doesn't have like a chorus. It doesn't have. It's just six parts, and does it again. And I was like, oh man, I need to break these into multiple tunes. I need to figure out what to do. I tried to sing over it. I didn't know where I was going. It was terrible. I couldn't make it work, but I liked the parts. And then there's this guy, this musician, this guitarist in Philadelphia named Dylan Lounsbury, incredible musician, and met him. Are you on Threads at
yeah,
all?
yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, in the Threads community, music community, which I just love, by the way,
Oh
it's
yeah, that's
everything.
awesome.
It's everything. And I reached out to him. I was just like, hey, what do you think about this? And originally he was just going to put some strings on it. And he did. If you hear the last, like, I don't know, minute to the song, there's a lot of string action, bringing a little bit of that disco vibe to it. Yeah. And he just sat down with his guitar and what he sent me was just, it was like done, like I sent him a thing. He loved it. He sent me some stuff and we were like, that's it. I didn't take it too seriously. I didn't worry about it too much. It just felt good and it just flowed. And he kind of was the glue that made it all those pieces work together.
Yeah, sometimes those, happy accidents end up being some of our best work.
Right.
And that's why I always encourage like a lot of up and coming just music creators. If you have a song, especially producers, I've heard so many stories about songs that producers didn't like or instrumentals that they didn't like that ended up becoming hits. So you just never know what course it's gonna take if you finish up the track. And aside from that, just talking about the instrumentation in the track, are you a producer as well?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't, you know, I guess I'm way too modest to call myself a producer, but I produce all my music,
Okay.
make it happen for sure. And really, I'm really, really big into textures and soundscape. Like I do not make sparse music. My music is very full, and for every little sound has a feeling to me. And I know it's too cluttered for some people, but um, I just geek out on it. I love it.
And with a lot of those synth sounds, do you use hardware or like do you produce with a DAW on your computer?
Yeah, I use a DAW. I got a real simple home studio. I mean, I don't even call it a studio, but I record music and I produce music
Yeah.
in it. And
Yeah.
I would love to scale up someday. Those Spotify dollars are not that much.
No,
It's not
no.
getting me enough to buy all the new equipment. So
And they're changing it.
I know, I know they are. They're making it harder and harder for us, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not even.
Yeah, I use a DAW, and like what I do is I try to find sounds I like and then manipulate them a little bit. So very few sounds you hear are exactly what came out of the DAW. So I kind of geek out on that part a lot. And again, it's just like tweaking knobs till it just
Yeah.
feels like a thing. And what you're saying about like young musicians and young producers, I'm relatively new at the like songwriting, putting music out in the world game, but I'm kind of a middle-aged old guy playing music. And what I would tell young people is you just got to trust your gut and not worry about your head too much.
Yeah.
If your gut feels it, if it means something to you, it's gonna mean something to someone else. That's what I'm learning.
Which program do you use to do your production in and your
I use
recording?
Logic.
Okay,
I use
yeah, yeah, me too. Me too. Well, I do like I do most of my recording in Logic, and then I would say I make a good amount of my beats in Logic too. I go between Logic, the MPC, and Machine, and then I also use my iPad and Beat Maker. It just all depends on whatever I feel like doing that day, or whatever I have with me. Because I usually take my iPad on the go to make beats. But did you hear about those new Logic updates?
No, tell me about it.
Yeah, so I think it's might be on the 15th of this month, but there's going to be a new saturator plugin, um, and it's gonna actually use the external microphone if you have a Mac or an iPad, or if you have your instrument mic'd up, to your audio interface, or however, you'll be able to use that one. On top of that, they're gonna have a new stem separator
Mm,
plug-in, so you'll be able to break tracks up now within Logic. What's the other one? Oh yeah, they're gonna be leaning more on AI with the new chips that they're releasing, the M4 and the iPad. So with that being said, they'll be able to, like, you'll have virtual drummers. You also have basses that you can use in your song, or you could even like take the MIDI instead of, because usually it'll be like an audio track, but you could break it down into MIDI and
mm,
be able to switch the instrument depending on the genre of music that you're producing. So I think those are pretty cool. It's actually gonna be a full like Logic 11 update, or
mm.
Logic 2 if you're on the iPad using Logic.
So we got to
But
buy it, is what you're saying.
no, they're gonna be a down. It's a free
Okay,
upgrade. Yeah, it's a
gotcha.
free upgrade. I think they did that though when because I've been using Logic for quite some time. When it went from Logic 9 to Logic 10, it was a
Mm,
free update as well.
mhm. Okay,
So
cool. Yeah, I
yeah.
wanted to talk to you about drums at some point, maybe more offline, but I use the Logic drummers and then I program them and I manipulate them, and I'm not, I think that's one of my weaknesses is programming drums so they sound like how I want them to sound. And so I have a lot to learn in that regard. So I need to pick your brain at some point.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But like it all kind of depends on what I'm producing in, but I do my drums. Sometimes I'll play them as is. I may sometimes use a step sequencer, depending on what I'm producing on. But yeah, we can definitely chop it up offline
Sounds
about
great.
it. Now, kind of with that being said, like, I think that learning an instrument is not necessarily a must, but I think it does help you as a creator, um, in terms of like having a basic understanding of like music theory, notes. What a lot of artists they make, or excuse me, a lot of music creators, they make songs, but couldn't necessarily tell you the key that the song is in. So, how important do you think it is for creators to learn at least one instrument?
That's a great question. I think it's really important. It was really important for me. It's sort of like learning a single instrument is like the gateway drug to learn more, And like I've never learned piano, but as you can tell, a lot of my stuff has synth and piano and stuff on it. So that's me because I have some foundation and a decent ear, I can play around and get what I want out of a piano, even though I played drums first and then taught myself guitar. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think for me, I just want to write songs. Like I love the process of songwriting and collaborating. And if I didn't play any instruments, I wouldn't be able to do what I love most about music. Now there are tons of people out there with amazing ears and feels for music that, you know, don't need to play guitar to get their vision to come to life. But for me, I absolutely need it. So I got a kid who's 11, just started playing bass, and I told them I was just like, hey, you got to play an instrument. I don't care what it is, just for a little while. And now addicted, right? And so I think that'll set my kid up for a good future if they want to continue doing music. But having that foundation, I think, is important.
Yeah, it's definitely important. I mean, I catch myself like reverting back to just some old techniques of, learning scales that I used to do years ago in high school and middle school, and I've created songs by just messing around with scales and coming up with some ideas. But a couple of years ago, what also happened to me was I ended up buying another trumpet because I was like, I want to get back into practicing and playing. And it's helped me from a standpoint of, I've used it, I would say here and there in some of my songs, use my trumpet. But also like one of the things that you kind of said was about learning the piano. That's something eventually that I want to do. As a having a home studio, but as a music creator, I just feel like learning the piano for me would would help me better create or have better ideas to create, should I say, when I do in the lab. But I think that just learning an instrument has helped me tremendously because a lot of times, and you mentioned it's not necessarily a must that you have to learn an instrument because a lot of guys, for example, or you may have some producers even that they're sample-based producers. So, if you're a sample-based producer, I wouldn't necessarily say that, learning an instrument might be beneficial. But I think if you want to get away from being a sample-based producer at some point, yeah, you may want to learn an instrument.
Two
Um,
things real quick.
yeah,
One, sometimes on threads, like we talked about, someone will say something about how a sample-based producer is not a musician. That's BS to me as far as I'm
yeah,
concerned. I mean, if you can put stuff together that makes you feel, makes other people move, I think you're a musician. And then something I thought about, I don't have great music theory at all, but I understand keys a little bit and chords. And I think what that has done is it's opened up my songwriting by having that baseline understanding because a lot of my music is like minor pentatonic. At least that's how it started, kind of simple, like sort of in the blues rock realm.
yeah.
Because I have a baseline understanding of chords, I've started now I have to research it. I don't know like what a six chord is or an 11 chord or whatever, but I can go on and be like, okay, so I kind of want to change the feel of this song. What chords will work in this key? And say, oh, that's different. Let me see if I can make that work sonically. So that's like a fun little experimentation that I think if I didn't have some just base level, I wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Um, Now in your city, Eugene, Oregon, what's the music scene like in terms of performances and music events?
Yeah, Eugene's a great town for music. Because of my life circumstances, I've done shows. I used to play a good amount of shows, but I would love to like tour someday. That'd be amazing. But I'm not able to really participate in the local scene, which is why Threads is so important to me,
Yeah.
'cause it is a music scene. But it's great. There are a lot of small venues. Summertime, there's an outdoor amphitheater here. And there's a lot of, I think, DIY indie musicians here, and there's a lot of creativity in this town. So it's a college town, so you have all that. But
Okay.
then it's also, yeah, it's a college, it's where the University of Oregon is. Go Ducks, you know. Um, but there's a lot of creatives here. It's been a town that's been a hippie town forever, and so it's kind of fostered creativity. And so there's a lot of artists here, there's a lot of musicians here, a lot of tie dyers here, all of
Okay.
that. So
Yeah.
it's a good place to create.
Well, first and foremost, I'll say go Ducks because if you notice, I got this on, and a week ago we drafted Jackson Power Johnson, I
Yeah,
think his
yeah,
name was,
yeah.
yeah. And
As a
ever
guard
since,
though, not a center. He's gonna be a guard for you.
yeah, it's gonna be a guard. And I've ever since I saw the kid talk at the press conference, I've just like his vibe. I watched some of his films, so I definitely thank y'all for that one.
That's
And
another
then
podcast.
and yeah, it's as far as the music scene, it's very similar here in Dallas. I mean, you got a few venues. There's actually a spot. I don't know if with your brother that was in Fort Worth if you've been down here, but there's a spot called Deep Ellum, which there's a lot of bars and places that artists can perform, and they have this music festival every year. So it's kind of I mean, it was better prior to COVID. Things are kind of still trying to get back going, even 4 years later. The turnouts aren't like they used to be in terms of those events, but I think it's going to get back to that point. But um, yeah, I encourage, that's part of why I also get on threads to network with other music creators. But over in Dallas, I'll get out every once in a while to do some performances or go to a music producer event, but also being able to network online on a platform like a Threads, Instagram, even X and YouTube to some degree has allowed me, whether it's partnerships doing songs or like interviews like we're doing now, just meeting people that they might know somebody that knows somebody and it just kind of keep going. So
Mhm.
I just encourage music creators, whatever role that you play in it, just to network whether locally or online. You never know what type of opportunities that can bring.
Yeah, and I was a basketball player growing up, and everyone always told me you got to play with people better than you, right? And then you got to play on your school team, your AAU team, whatever the team is, and it's the same with music too. It's playing with people that can challenge you, give you a different perspective on what you're doing. Um, it's just huge. It helps expand the musical vocabulary and what's possible, and also sometimes I don't know about you, but it can be easy to be like kind of controlling and
Yeah,
nitpicky about our little babies, our little creations,
yeah,
and like, being able like with lizard skin to give over something to someone and just trust them that their vision works for a reason and then have it come back. That's a really amazing feeling. It's like the sum is bigger than the parts or whatever the phrase is. I don't know. The
yeah.
whole thing bigger than the sum of the parts.
And that is true because like there was a time where I feel like my creative career has went into three different directions. Like there was the time when I used to create with a group of people, and then I kind of ventured on into my own space, and I got to a point where I was just so gung ho on doing things my way for a little
Mhm.
bit. And then I went to another phase, kind of like you were saying, where I started to, not necessarily with a group, but more individual people I would create music with. And I think that you pick up a little something from each of those, people that you might network with. So I think that collaborating, you're gonna learn something new sometimes, whether that's mixing, maybe it's a new technique in terms of creating melodies. Maybe it could be like we were talking about earlier, somebody who they know how to play an instrument that you're learning how you want to learn how to play. So hanging around them, you might pick up something like that. So you never know where you can or who you can grow from.
That's right. And like Dylan in this song, he has a couple guitar lines and he plays a couple chords that I never would have thought of. It like wouldn't even occur to me. You could have said, "I want you to take a year and play everything you could play on this song." I would never have come up with that. But now, like hearing the relationship between what he did and what the song was, I don't know technically what it is, but I can like take that relationship and sort of reference it in another song. Okay, that feeling that he created, not something I ever would have figured out, but now how can I replicate that feeling in another tune? Because I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I totally agree. Artists out there, producers out there, network.
Hmm.
What do you have for your plans, for the remainder of 2024?
So I was thinking I have a ton of songs in the bank ready, just about ready to go. Probably 16 songs. And Lizard Skin is on this thing I started called the single series. And I like the idea of an old school single. So we actually got vinyl singles pressed of it, the A side and the B side. I love that. I love that. And so I thought instead of doing a whole album, which I've done two of now, and it's become such a thing. It's so massive, and I love the story of albums, but I guess I'm focusing on turning those songs into a bunch of micro albums with this single series. So there's going to be an A side and a B side. Volume two will probably come out in a month or two, and then volume three probably later this summer. And the two songs are always related in one way or another. So it's just a little micro project, and it'll be able to, I don't know, take a little of the pressure off and sort of stagger the work
Yeah,
as opposed to just like go, 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 and then be like kind of wiped. And so I just feel like picking up momentum for me, and it allows me to create, put some out in the world, create, put some out in the world, but do it with like a package, like with some intentionality to it. So yeah,
Yeah.
you'll be, there'll be at least 4 or 6 more songs released this year.
Okay, we're gonna definitely be looking out for that. Kind of with that being said, in terms of your creative process, like do you sometimes, especially being a musician, sometimes make the instrumentation first, or do you
Mm.
write and build around instrumentation? Like, tell us a little bit about your process.
Yeah, I wish I could say that there was a single process, but as you can tell, I'm just like super into like the vibes of it and the feeling of it. So sometimes I'll have a phrase and like I got a song called coming out called Can't Stay. And I came up with that phrase and had context around. I was like, okay, so what does the music sound like for this? Like, am I making like a sweet, happy song? Am I doing a Rage Against the Machine, pissed off type tune or something in between? And so like the idea or what that phrase meant to me led to the music. But then a lot of times I'll have like lizard skin. I'll have some jams and be like, okay, I really like these parts. What does it tell me? Like, what does it need? What does it want? And I really think like listening to the music or the words, if you pay attention to what it's telling you or what it's bringing up for you, I think that's my process. Whether it's music first or words first, I like try to really say like, is it speaking to me? And if so, okay, how can I make it uh, like get inside me and crawl around for a little while? And
Yeah.
so that's when I start like doing the production, right? Just different sounds, bringing this in, bringing that in, making it loud, making it soft, whatever it might be. Um, and then often, the Sizzos I call it a collaborative project because I want as many people to be part of it is want to be, friends and collaborators. And so then often what I'll do is I'll turn something over to someone and be like there's a guy in town, a great singer-songwriter named Kabir Green, and he plays bass on a lot of the tracks, does backing vocals, and he'll tell me if the melody sucks, that type of thing. And so I would say once I get like a baseline, there are certain people that I'll throw things out to and be like, hey, you want to sing on this? You want to play on this? Like, what do you think? And then sometimes people are like, it's good as is. Mostly people are like, oh, I want to jump on that too. Let me get on that. And then it comes back and we work from there.
Yeah, yeah, that's like several different ways. I can't say as well that I have like one way to create because there have been times where I don't know, I'm just in the middle just doing whatever and I think of some lyrics and I remember those lyrics and then
You have
I
like
gotta
7,000 voice memos on your phone.
yeah, yeah.
It
And
totally.
either make the voice memos or type it in notes or whatever. And then I'll get back to the house and the studio and I'll start making a beat around that. Or, it could be sometimes like the most weirdest thing to me is I might make a beat like today and I have no lyrics for it. But then 6 months from now, I'm just driving and I hear the beat come on while I'm driving and I'm like, it's the right time to create to this song. So you just never know when that inspiration is going to hit you because it might even be an instrumental that I posted to my website for an artist to buy, and I end up taking it down because I want to create to it. So it's kind of weird how that works, but get those ideas out. You got tools. We talked about voice notes. We talked about notes itself. I remember like, back in we talking about creating in the 90s and stuff, and in at that time we used to beat on the desk
Mm.
and we made some small raps around that time, but of course it wasn't as accessible to make music back then as it is now. But you create however you need to create. The creative process is a beautiful thing and it's different for each of us.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is that I would tell anyone out there trying to make music is to just keep creating, like pick up the guitar or whatever, just knock the dust off every day, do a little something because like you said, there are so many ideas that float around, but they're just not ready to be, to blossom yet. But if you're kind of creating every day, then you have an openness, I think, to what might come for a beat or a song or whatever. And then when it is ready, you can grab it.
Yeah. And that creating, that repetition, you're gonna get better from just that alone.
That's right.
Where can our listeners follow you at? on socials, and where can they find your music as well?
Yeah, so Sizzos Music, Sizzos Music is if you type that in, you'll be able to find a lot of stuff, on all the platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal. If you've got Tidal, prefer that to Spotify, and then on Bandcamp too, where we have some vinyls for sale. And yeah, I just encourage people to reach out. If you want to follow on Spotify or Bandcamp, it'd be great. Again, I'm trying to create a community of like-minded folks around music, so always love to hear from people.
Go ahead, give the Sizzles a follow. Check out that new single, Lizard Skin, available on all platforms. You can follow me on Instagram and threads at d._major music. Also the same thing on TikTok. If you do use Twitter or X, you can follow me on there as well at d.mme. And if you listen to this interview, if you listen to this interview, go ahead, give us a shout out on Instagram, and promise you we're gonna repost it to let you know, appreciative of the support as well. And if you made it this far, please hit the like button and tune in to new episodes of the Major Music Lounge podcast here on YouTube and all podcast streaming platforms. It's been D Dot and it's been the Sizzles here on the Major Music Lounge. We appreciate you tuning in, and we are out.
Major Music.